Good morning. We're at Par Fisheries on this particular session. I've got a couple of day sessions ahead of me, so I'm really going to have to move around and put as much effort into it as I possibly can to try and buy a bite. It's a lake that I've not actually fished before. There's about 120 fish in here. It's about 4 acres. Typical farm reservoir in Essex, just down the road from Upminster. The fish in here are absolutely stunning, I'm told. It's set up quite high, but there's trees all the way around it, but we're still getting this stiff southwesterly breeze at the moment, and it's got a real nip to it. So although it's the beginning of spring, it doesn't really feel like it at the moment. So this morning the fish were showing out sort of in the main part of this sort of basin here. It's about 10 foot deep out there, and we saw quite a few fish show when we first got here. I fancied the swim in the corner, but there was somebody in it already. They went quite quickly, but because the fish were here, I started fishing here, and all I've done is flicked out 2 pop-ups amongst where the fish are showing, cast a little bit past them and drawn the lead back, and then just felt it down onto the bottom. I've got a gooed up one on one rod that's got the squid goo on it, and then the other one I've got Mystic Spice on it, because they're 2 that I've done really well on at this sort of time of year in the past. The rig's very simplistic. Just a simple helicopter rig on a safe zone leader, incorporating the no tray system. One's a little hinge stiff rig, and the other one's Gaz Farehams rig that Ali uses as well, that's a little bit of fluorocarbon with just a soft section at the end with just the hook standing up. No bait in the swim at all. I'm just seeing if I can get a quick bite. And then the other rod I've just cast down the margins because some fish got seen off these reeds yesterday afternoon. So again, just a single hook bait at the moment, trying to get a quick bite. And we'll just keep scanning the water, and if the situation changes, then I'll have a move. It's middle of the afternoon now, the sun's out. I've had a couple of zigs on for a good few hours now. I moved down here because it just didn't look right in the other swim. No more fish showed, and the sun was beating into this bit. And I've just cast the zigs into that calm water over there. 1 4 foot off the bottom, 1 6 foot off the bottom in 10 foot. Bit of black foam on one, black and yellow on the other one, stuff that I've caught on before. I'm not the best zig angler in the world, to be honest, but in that calm water out there, it just looked like they'd be hanging around off the bottom. That hasn't produced anything, so I've chucked a rod close in where the fish were seen yesterday afternoon. The wind's almost exactly the same. So I came over here yesterday just to have a plumb around and just to get a feel for the place, because I've never seen it before. So a rod's gone back there, and then this one's going over to the far side. I just scattered a few boilies in over that far side. I'm not going to go too close. It actually works out 17 rod lengths, and that takes you about 3 or 4 rod lengths off the bank. I want to be at the bottom of the shelf in the slightly deeper water where the bait was. I've got one slam up tight into that corner as well, just off the reeds. So pretty much I've got all bases covered. Donk, lovely. Well, it's nearing the end of the first day. Not much has happened, to be perfectly honest. As I said before, I've tried the zigs, that didn't produce, and I've gone back on the bottom now on all 3 rods, one close in, one over on the far side around some bait that I put in yesterday, and one right over in the corner up against the reeds, and nothing's happened. But I haven't seen any fish show or anything. There might have been one showed down in the corner there a little while ago, and at the moment really it's a guessing game. I haven't really learnt a lot because I haven't caught a lot, so I'll have to put this one down to experience and then come back next week and see if we can do better then.
A few days ago, Dan gave me a ring and invited me to come down to Par Fisheries with him. So I met him in the car park here this morning. We went for a wander round. The lake's basically a horseshoe shape with the centre bit of the horseshoe being an out of bounds. When we got round to this bank, which is the right hand side of it, we see a few ripples coming out the mist, so we knew there was a few fish about. I set up in the swim, cast a pineapple pop-up straight over onto the reeds, went round then and sprinkled some bait in. Cast one down to the left, did the same, and then the third rod I put a zig on. The water was 7.5 foot and I set it at about 6.5, so I was about a foot and a half behind it, under it rather. Then me and Dan sat and chatted for the morning. A few more fish have moved in the corner since then. Dan's gone off to fish his swim and I've broke one of my alarms down and set the rod up in the corner because the fish are in right close. I've put another pineapple on that, but it's on the deck rather than popped up. So it's looking promising for the afternoon with this sun coming out, see what happens.
I've chosen to go back in the same swim as I did on Friday for a couple of reasons. One, there was a lot of fish around that other side this morning, just as it was getting light. It was freezing cold, but they were still showing. So Dave quite rightly has jumped in there and he's trying to catch them out that side of the lake. But there were fish showing here on Friday when I left. And I hung it out to the last minute, basically wound in just as it was getting dark, and a fish showed almost over every rod. So a fish showed just off the edge down in front of those reeds. Another one showed on the far side over my sort of middle rod, and then another one showed in this bay because the wind was pumping into here. So I felt like if I'd stayed the night, I probably would have got a bite. And because I know how many wraps it is out to the spots, it made sense to come back in here. But I haven't fished straight away. It's now 2:45 and I'm just about getting the third rod cast out. I've been up the trees on the spit, looking in the edge, looking out in open water. And one really good thing, I've not fished with Dave before. We started chatting about zigs and he's not a massive zig angler, but he has been catching on zigs a couple of foot under the surface. Now, last week I was fishing 4 foot off the bottom and 6 foot off the bottom, so I probably wasn't high enough, and I was really ready to fish zigs on here for the day today, but I've just not seen any signs of fish drifting around on the surface. They're in the other bay, definitely, but they don't seem to be in here. But as you can see now, the wind is pumping into those reeds. I know that the far casts are 19 wraps, so I've whacked 2 rods out already. They've gone beautifully just off that margin, and I've just put a few half baits over the top of them. I've trickled them in during the day. So this morning I put a little bit in, middle of the day I put a little bit in, I've just put another little bit in, and now I'm going to cast over the top. So this one against that reed line over there is 11 wraps. So I'm going to get this one out and then I'll be fishing basically for probably about 4 hours, something like that. But the fish started showing at sort of 5 o'clock on Friday. So I'm reckoning that if I put rods in now, I might get a chance between sort of 4 and 6. And at this time of the year, 1 bite's enough. That's it. Lovely.
My first tip for the spring is a common one, bright hook baits. When the fish have been laid up all winter, they're a bit dormant, they ain't as switched on as they normally are. They're a bit hungry where they've been laid up as well. They're looking for food, so you want something nice and obvious. A nice bright hook bait in front of their face normally does it.
Pop-ups at this time of the year seem to catch the majority of the fish if you're fishing on the deck, and I use bright ones most of the time. So at the moment I'm getting my bites on the squid goo, getting my bites on Mystic Spice, and I'm also getting my bites on almond. They're my top three. By fishing a small one that's fairly close to the bottom with a fairly small hook, so I'm using a hinge stiff rig, I'm using a size 8 choddy. My upright section out of mouth trap is very, very short. The boom is very, very short. That's made of hybrid stiff, and that's fished on a helicopter rig. So if I drop it into any chod on the bottom, the top bead is maybe 6 inches to a foot from the lead, depending on how much chod and weed are out there. So I know the rig is presented. And by putting it just that bit off the bottom, I think it's a little bit more in their face. And so far this spring, I've done brilliantly fishing hinge stiff rigs and fairly low pop-ups.
Spend as much time as you can looking at the water. When the sun's out, look on the back of the wind, because that's a nice area for fish to get. If you notice fish getting into a certain area of the lake because the sun's in a certain position and you've got a couple of days, get there the day before a couple of hours early and set the traps before the fish turn up. If you can see the fish, you can capitalise on the areas they're in.
Use as little bait as you possibly can. The fish are not feeding hard at this time of the year, and by putting in loads of bait, you are massively cutting down your chances. I don't think there's anything wrong with trickling a bit of bait in between sessions and light baiting when you're fishing, but you stove a few kilos in, you might as well go home.
Watch what the fish are doing. If they're coming crashing out of the water and they're in 6-7 feet of water, you know by the way they're showing that they're probably feeding down on the bottom. But if they're just slipping through the surface, don't neglect to zig. You know, you can tell where the fish are by how they roll. So just keep an eye on what they're doing.
And if you want to fish on the bottom, then you want to be in the margins or in shallow water. So this situation here, we've got a far margin with all reeds down it. We're seeing fish, especially in front of Dave, right in them reeds, you know, in sort of 3 or 4 feet of water, just sort of milling around. So if you've got sedges and reeds, then fish right up close to them at this time of the year. If you pick your waters right, you should be getting plenty of bites in the sort of late winter and early spring.
My first few sessions on a new water, I never really expect to catch much, but it's more of a learning curve. And today, if I look what the fish have done, the sun came out, the fish moved in round the edges, and they went behind reeds. And that's the kind of thing I'd expect on a busy day ticket water. I always like to, you know, if the locals come along, pick their brains a little bit, and they told me that zig rigs work reasonably well. So if I came down again, I think I would definitely fish 2 zigs through the day, see if I could get them. The fish were moving around the top quite a lot, so it shows they do use the upper layers on this lake quite a lot this time of year. You know, you're trying to build a pitch all the time, and as you build the pitch, you get closer to catching one. And if I came back, I'd put my money on having a good chance for fish.
Well, we've come to the end of the second day at Par, and although I've had 2 tench, I wouldn't say it's been a success by any stretch. What I've learned from it is, and if I came back fairly soon, I would just fish zigs. We've literally just seen in the last few minutes fish sort of just tipping the surface, definitely a carp because there was a swirl underneath it. I'd seen a little vortex just out in front of here, probably 2 or 3 rod lengths in front of the rods. Again, looked very carpy, and I felt I fished better today. Took my time, did a lot more looking and a lot less fishing, and I'm still confident that one could go at any minute. I think they're in the right spots for fishing on the bottom, right up against that far bank and up against the reeds down the side there. But in hindsight, it probably would have been better to have zigs on all day long, but it's an intriguing place. Obviously they're beautiful fish in here. It's not jam-packed with fish, but there's enough to go out and you know, give it some serious consideration, and hopefully I'll come back at some point in the future and give it a go when they're feeding and catch a couple.